Imagine living in a place where your life could be destroyed, not by what you did, but by what someone said. No evidence, no witnesses, no proof, just words. Now imagine those words coming from a child, and not just heard, but believed. Believed by neighbors, by leaders, by an entire town. In 1692, in Salem Village, Massachusetts, this became reality. A place where fear replaced reason, and accusations became truth. And at the center of it all was a young girl whose voice would help shape one of the darkest chapters in American history. Her name was Abigail Williams. She was around 11 years old, living in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris. Very little is known about her parents, and that absence leaves her early life unclear. But what is clear is the world she grew up in, a world defined by strict Puritan beliefs. In this society, children were not raised to question. They were raised to obey. Religion was not just part of life, it was life. Every thought, every action was measured against sin. And one idea stood above all others, that the devil was real, not distant, not symbolic, but present, watching, waiting, and capable of working through anyone, even a child. But Salem was not a peaceful place. Beneath its religious structure, there were divisions. Land disputes created resentment. Economic differences created jealousy. Some families held influence, others struggled to survive. And in a community like this, tension does not disappear. It builds, quietly, slowly, until something gives it a reason to rise. In early 1692, something began to happen inside the Parris household. Abigail Williams and her cousin began acting strangely. They screamed without warning. Their bodies twisted uncontrollably. They claimed they were being touched, hurt, by forces no one could see. At times, they spoke in voices that frightened even the adults around them. It was unsettling. It was confusing. And most importantly, could not be explained. Doctors were called. But medicine in 1692 had limits. There were no modern diagnoses, no understanding of psychological conditions. And when something could not be explained, the explanation became spiritual. The conclusion was clear. These girls were bewitched. Soon, Abigail began to speak. She named people. She described them as the source of her pain. The first accused were not random. They were individuals already on the edge of society, different, misunderstood, unprotected, and once accused, they were immediately feared, because in Salem, an accusation was not a question. It was a judgment. What began with a few names spread quickly. More accusations followed, and then more. Neighbors accused neighbors. Children accused adults. The number of accused grew, and with it, the fear. Because once fear becomes shared, it becomes powerful. And once it becomes powerful, it becomes uncontrollable. To manage the growing chaos, court was established. But this court operated differently. It accepted something called spectral evidence, claims that a person's spirit had appeared and caused harm. No physical proof was required. No witnesses needed, only belief. And once belief became law, the system was no longer about justice. It was about fear. Those accused were given a choice: confess and live, or deny and risk death. Many confessed, not because they were guilty, but because they wanted to survive. Others refused, and those people were executed. The executions began in June 1692, and they did not stop. Men and women were hanged. Some were respected members of the community. Some were elderly. Some had done nothing but exist in the wrong place at the wrong time, and none of it required proof. One man chose a different path. His name was Giles Corey. He refused to plead, and because of that, he was not given a trial. Instead, he was laid on the ground, and stones were placed on his chest. More weight, until his body could no longer endure it. His final words were simple: more wait. By the end of the trials, over 200 people had been accused. 19 were executed. Dozens were imprisoned. Families were torn apart. And Salem was no longer the same town it once was. Eventually, people began to question, could all of this be real? Could so many people be guilty? Or had fear taken control? Even leaders began to doubt. And slowly, the belief that fueled everything began to collapse. By early 1693, the trials ended. The court was dissolved. The accusations stopped. But the consequences remained. Years later, the government admitted its mistakes. Some victims were cleared. Compensation was offered. But for those who had lost their lives, it meant nothing, because justice had come too late. The Salem Witch Trials were never about witches. They were about fear, about what happens when belief replaces evidence, when panic spreads faster than truth, and when a society forgets to question itself. Because history teaches us something powerful. The most dangerous thing is not the unknown. It is fear, left unchecked. One of the first accused was Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Paris household. Unlike others, she confessed, but her confession did not end the fear. Fed it, she described dark rituals, spirits, and meetings with the devil. Whether true or not, her words gave shape to the hysteria. And once fear had a story, it became even more powerful. What made Salem different was who held the power to accuse. Children, young girls, whose words carried deadly weight. In any other place, they would have been questioned, doubted, dismissed. But here, they were believed, and that belief gave them influence no child should ever have. But not all accusations came from fear alone. Some came from opportunity. When someone was accused, their property could be taken, their land, their belongings, their place in society. In a divided community, this created motive, because in Salem, an accusation could mean more than survival, could mean gain. As the trials continued, fear changed behavior. People stopped speaking openly, stopped defending the accused, because defending someone could make you the next target. Silence became protection, and in that silence, the accusations grew louder, because no one was left to challenge them. What happened in Salem was not sudden. It was built, step by step, fear by fear, belief by belief, until truth no longer mattered. And once truth disappears, anything can take its place. That is why Salem still matters today, because the danger was never witches. It was people believing without question, and history reminds us that it can happen again. When the trials ended, the fear did not disappear overnight. It lingered in homes, in conversations, in silence. Families who had accused others now lived beside the consequences. Neighbors who once trusted each other now carried doubt, because what had been done could not be undone. And in a town built on belief, trust had been broken. Over time, voices began to change. Some who had accused others expressed regret. Public apologies were made. Leaders acknowledged mistakes. And slowly, the truth began to surface. That innocent people had suffered. That fear had led to injustice. But regret could not restore what was lost. What happened in Salem did not stay in Salem. It became a warning, a reminder carried through history of how fear can spread, how belief can overpower truth, and how easily justice can fail. The Salem Witch Trials are remembered today, not for witches, but for what they reveal about people. Because the real danger was never the unseen. It was the willingness to believe without question. And that lesson still matters.